Hey, how's it going, guys? Bring your friends here. A lot of you also know me as Countless. Today I'm making a response video to Helseth as he talks about many problems with the competitive scene in general. While I enjoyed the video as a whole, however, he asked for a genuine discussion, so I figured I'd respond with this video and give my honest opinion regarding certain topics. So let's get started.
Um, and what we can do as a community, what the competitive scene can do, and what ArenaNet can do to fix what issues there are in the game.
Well, the community can only offer feedback, and this lies on the developers and whether or not they listen to player feedback and knowing what feedback to take seriously and what not to take seriously, on top of having a clear communication with the community as well. And it's safe to say that this isn't one of Guild Wars 2's strong points. You even agree with this later on in your video, and if you didn't, your video and my video wouldn't even exist to begin with.
Honestly, I'd rather have the most disastrous esports scene ever over a scary ass taxi ad where they embarrass themselves.
Who wouldn't say this that's involved in the scene? It's just like, this is clearly biased. You're getting paid by the organization. I mean, who wouldn't want to keep the esports scene above water when it means money in your pocket? I mean, that's just pretty self-explanatory.
Competitive players, esports players in particular, will always continue to try to stay at the top, right? So we will be practicing endlessly. We will be discovering new techs and all that stuff, which means that there's more and more and more layers added to the game.
Obviously, it's no surprise that competitive players put more time into the game. However, it can be debated that ArenaNet actually hurts build diversity more than adding to it with their whole balance philosophy, which can be also safely said that it's doing build diversity more harm than good. And you can also argue that you could be referring to becoming a better player, and that's fine. However, only so much growth can occur as a player or mastering your spec when overall build diversity in the game is very lacking.
People that invest an insane level of time in the game are bound to stream it, make some content for it. Many of the biggest names in Guild Wars 2 period are people that are involved in esports.
Well, according to solynome.game.guildwars2, the majority of people streaming the game in the past 30 days are streaming actually PvE content, which is roughly 60% of total streamers. However, you and a few others who stream PvP content make up around 30%. And the missing 10% is the Guild Wars 2 individual stream, which I didn't count because they don't apply as one person. If you have better data that goes back further than 30 days, then by all means feel free. However, you could be right in saying that the top streamers in Guild Wars 2 stream PvP content. However, if that's the case, they're either not very consistent when it comes to streaming or have quit the game entirely.
Okay, so people cheat. People will backstab their teammates. They will reform with other teammates. They basically do everything they can to do as well as possible. And this is understandable. Like, I know it sounds despicable. Everyone is just looking out for themselves and not the long run of Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 used to have weeklies, essentially. A tournament every single week. Where there would be a tournament in ESL, and there would be some prize money at the end of it. And after 3 or 4 weeks, there would be a monthly, and the monthly would be a larger amount of money, and then would continue like that. Teams could do terrible 5 weeks in a row, but they would stick with each other, and they would be aiming for the next tournament together.
This is inaccurate, at least on the North American side. It was even more cutthroat when it came to people leaving teams and rejoining than the way Pro League is currently established now. And the reason for that is there was no incentive for sticking with teams because the tournaments were weekly that anybody could join. So regardless of the reason, whether it be drama, players not performing to certain standards, or popularity contests, or just team captains being cunts, teams would drop faster than amulets being deleted from SPVP in general.
When it's playing, assuming that there won't be anything else, because we don't have the information. ArenaNet doesn't really release it, so we don't know whether ArenaNet's not releasing it simply because they don't want, they want to do it properly in some sort of fashion, or because they simply, they're thinking about doing it or not. We don't know. We don't have their figures. We don't know anything, essentially. So we're playing in the dark, and that's what's leading to a lot of the instabilities that you see in teams. Teams backstab each other left and right because they don't see the long term of this.
I agree. One of ArenaNet's worst qualities is communication with their audience. If they were taking the scene seriously, they would obviously be more clairvoyant when it comes to future plans, when it comes to SPVP, or any section of the community as a whole. There's a reason why they use the word soon and when it's ready and when we have more data, more than actually giving the community ideas on what's to come. However, I don't think that's correlated with people backstabbing each other. As I said before, in the Go 4 days, it was just as relevant, if not worse.
Guild Wars 2 PvP forums has essentially no competitive players. Right? Almost all of my viewers are competitive players. People that have been in the game for a really long time. All of them pretty much have gotten legend, and all of them basically know about the depth of the game. Guild Wars 2 has tried to appeal to everyone in kind of a way. In PvP, right? Like people that look at the Guild Wars 2 PvP system right now can see that there's basically something for everyone there, to the point where if you don't want to be a competitive player, but you still want to reach the highest rank in Guild Wars 2, you can do that super easily with no stress at all. You just grind your cute little legend wings and you're done.
First off, you say your viewers are competitive by reinforcing that they are legend players. Then you refer to legend as a casual grind in which anyone can achieve, which I'll assume is just an honest rambling mistake by you. However, putting your viewers aside, you're right. Legend is not something that should be easily maintained through a time gate. There has to be some sort of skill gate involved with getting legend status, otherwise it devalues the meaning of status of being legend. This has been a problem for the game since Season 1, and the fact that it hasn't been changed is obviously disappointing to say the very least. It seems to me that at least at the start, there was a blatant move by ArenaNet to appease the casuals by lowering the barrier to legend status in an attempt to get more people to play, or at least that's how I think what happened. But by doing so, you essentially have removed all meaning from legend for the minority of players who are actually playing well above average at the game.
And I would love to see that the scene somehow grows up to actually linking each other again. And I believe that we pro players and any competitive player in general can help a lot with this.
The only time I can actually recall this type of thing happening was when Guild Wars 2 PvP was first incorporated into the scene. For those of you who don't know, Guild Wars 2 PvP TV was a 24-hour round-the-clock community Twitch channel that mostly focused around PvP that consisted of around 24 or so players from NA and EU, myself included, that streamed around the clock with great success with like an hour interval. So like one guy would stream for an hour and then we would go into like a Twitch chat and be like, hey, who else wants to stream? Or who else is ready, and blah blah blah, and then the next guy would go and the next guy would go. And the stream would just continuously be up. And the cool thing about it was a really genius idea, because even for people who did not have a mad follower base on Twitch, the community as a whole would essentially help you out because it would keep the viewers up. So that being said, if one guy got a lot of viewers, you could just basically pass it off to the next guy. I mean, I guess now you could kind of say that the follow function, or not the follow function, you know, you hand all your viewers off to somebody else when you're done on Twitch, is essentially the same thing. But it was just the idea that was really good. It forced people to work together or whatnot. Not to mention that it was always up. There was a schedule to maintain, and you always knew when people were going to come on and stream. So that being said, everyone worked together regardless of status, drama, and so on. We even had a Skype chat, as I said, to organize streaming schedules. And it generated mad viewership. Like, the top streamers were, off the top of my head, I think it was Helseth, Arkin, and myself, along with a few notable others.
They've said in the post that they wanted to make it a little more prestigious. And I really believe that if we had carrots attached to skill, and that they didn't make it such a grind fest in the pip progression system, right? That if there was something that you generally had to be really good, maybe you had to queue with some friends and get really good together and reach a certain level, and then you would get like a glorious hero armor piece, right? Which basically no longer exists in the game, right? I would love that. That's extended armor. It's rare armor. People would care about it, similar to how people care about the gear in raids.
While I approve of the idea, however, there needs to be more choice to keep players interested. I feel that I speak for the majority by saying that I believe the SPVP community would support such a system that gave ways to access skin-only versions with no stats for you PvE players who are going to complain about, PvP is catered, blah blah blah, on any piece of gear in PvE. Give the players ways to get cosmetic versions of the PvE counterpart, and people would eat that shit up immediately. If you're going to be concerned about the time it takes to get certain pieces, then by all means implement a system that does exactly that and make the player work for it. But giving the player choice of how they want to look is key. Giving them only a particular piece of armor, like you were talking about the glorious armor set, and it won't really work out, in my opinion. There has to be more variety. Not everyone's tastes are the same, and giving them a whole palette in terms of what they can choose from, and it will instantly be a success.
If you're really good, then just stream. I will do my best to host everyone that seems good. If like reach out, if you're a good player and you're a streamer, hit me up. Like I host people whenever I'm done. I will host you 400 trolls that will spam your chat. Why not?
All right, this one is rather funny because I would assume it's rather hard for new and upcoming players that don't have much exposure to take you seriously when you don't even take your own audience seriously. It's like every time I see your stream, it's always something relating to I will stream for 30 minutes whenever I get a subscription, or per subscription you get. Let's play a hypothetical and say that a new and good upcoming player wanted to get more views and saw your stream. Do you honestly think that someone who streams more based off getting paid is going to care about helping the little guy? I mean, you really have to, regardless if you do it for clickbait or just for the lulz, you really have to stop and question yourself on this one.
The casters, a lot of them are completely detached from the competitive players. Similar to how I said the community is, a lot of the casters are too. There's an exception to this, which is Hurix and Storm. They were competitive players and they entered it. They know basically the NA scene. They're very much in touch. Maybe not as much right now as they used to be, but they're trying to keep in touch as much as they can. And I'm not saying that the European casters don't try or keep in touch, but they're not. There's a serious detachment from the competitive scene there, and it basically leads to this case where they're kind of part of the people that don't know what to do, what to show to further showcase the game.
I agree. Hurix and Storm, in my opinion, at least at the time of recording this video, is the best there is when it comes to people shoutcasting the game. The EU scene is questionable in terms of the depth of the level of shoutcasting because most of them, if not all of them, play at a extremely casual level. Therefore, it hurts the image of the game overall. There's a lot of conflict of interest when it comes to good shoutcasters because personally, everyone who's qualified to, at least in my opinion, speak about the game in a competitive manner is anyone who has actually participated in a competitive tournament or has been on a well-standing team for a long amount of time. However, being on a pro league team pays more than a shoutcasting position as far as I'm aware. Otherwise, you would see a rise of quality when it comes to casting almost immediately. So the only way that it's going to happen is if someone is just super good at the game and it just so happens to be extremely passionate about the shoutcasting position. Otherwise, you won't really see a rise in quality in casting, regardless of if it's the game mode, in my opinion, fucking things up for it in terms of viewership and quality and all that jazz.
ArenaNet needs to attempt to make it more easy to spectate. There's many ways that can be. UI can be cleaned up. They've done some good cleanups, but there's still more. Camera angles needs to stop being used, basically. You can't do the overhead camera angle and all that stuff. At least not much at all, because it basically gives no information at all. Not even a professional player can tell what's happening when you're doing the overhead camera view. Another thing that casters need to polish is they need to stop jumping in between perspectives all the time. If there's a fight, they should. It sounds insane, right? It sounds insane, but just they should have the camera on basically one person, max jump into two during an entire fight every single time. Because right now, basically the action's way too sporadic. You miss so many things because you can actually never get a view of what's happening. The casting basically becomes this nature of nothing's actually commentated on. Like red team is winning this fight. This guy went down. This guy is low. This kind of stuff. There's nothing on the individual skills.
So you mentioned camera angles being a problem, jumping between perspectives, and the lack of calls from commentators as a result. Have you ever even questioned that the source of all three of these problems is Conquest? Like, Conquest by design is a game type that sometimes has key battles happening in all three places simultaneously. So therefore, regardless, if we're going to go to your idea and stick to one guy and not mess with the camera angle for the majority of the fight, or panning from one person to another, you're still going to miss out on key important elements no matter what you do. The only solution that I can think of is adding 2v2 or 3v3 deathmatch, and here's why. Not only would you have more competition with a smaller community, but with 2v2, for example, there would be less people to manage, which would fix the lack of calls problem, and everyone would realistically be on the screen at one time, which fixes the jumping between perspectives problem because you can see every player. And obviously at this point, fixing the camera angles would be simplistic at best. Like, this is one topic that I'm absolutely baffled that no one has really suggested as a fix to what you were just talking about as far as problem. And it would fix it quite easily. It might not be the answer that everyone wants to hear, but I think it's the change that I think everyone needs in order for the game to be player, caster, and viewer friendly. But in conclusion, I made this video because you had some good points that I agreed with and some that I didn't, and some that were left out that I felt were really important and needed to be discussed anyways. So hopefully you didn't take my responses too personal. I was just responding at face value on how I saw it, regardless of how I felt about you personally. So I'm just being as forthcoming and as honest as I can be. However, it just comes to a question of whether or not they listen to player feedback in general and how they take it from here. Helseth, along with everyone else, thanks for watching. I'm Helseth, bring your friends, and I'll see you guys later.